you don't know what you don't know. That's just what I like to tell advisors.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So let's just have a conversation about what you do know.
Yeah.
Right? And then we can come back to you with like, okay, well, here's what our other clients are doing.
Welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. Brought to you by Elite Consulting Partners, it's the only podcast offering unfiltered guidance and direct advice for all things concerning financial advisors, RIAs, and the practitioners in the wealth management business. Learn more and subscribe today at eliteconsultingpartners.com/podcast. And now, here's your host, Frank LaRosa.
Hey everybody, welcome to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. I am your host, Frank LaRosa, and this is the JEDI edition with Sue
JEDI
Cheema.
Council.
This is the JEDI Council. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, I love it. We haven't done this in a while.
I know, you've been doing
missed
some.
Frank.
I know, you've been doing some with Brian. I feel like you're cheating on me.
Of course not, never.
A little bit of competition. Whose episodes perform better than others. So I guess I don't really care as long as they all perform really well. So anyway, for the listeners, thanks for joining us. These are great conversations. We hope they're educational for you. And our JEDI Council is where we talk about one of our business service lines, which is called JEDI Data Solutions, where we help advisors, practitioners, OSJs, large enterprises, really optimize data, work on sort of a single source of truth, as we were talking about it. I was talking to somebody about it the other day, and really how to make your business run better. Today, we want to really talk about really client engagement, right? And as I say, make data-driven decisions to enhance your client relationships. So we're not really talking about the business side of this. It's really about how to use data and whatever CRM systems that you're using, whatever data solutions and data points that you're using, really to enhance your client service, right? So, I'll just start off. Sort of, I'll ask you this question: like, why and how have you seen data improve client engagement? So, and again, for this conversation, we're just talking about clients. We're not talking about prospects. We're not talking about marketing. We're not talking about anything else. It's really a set of clients that you have with your team, and how to increase client engagement and ultimately increase revenue of your practice.
Yeah, so two ways that I can think about on that is the more data that you are able to track about a client or all of your clients or households, the better you are at identifying the outliers, people who are not engaging, people who may need some support getting lifted up from a red to a yellow to a green, let's say. And the other aspect of this is, if the answer is personalization, everyone likes a personal touch, right? The white glove service. And how do you deliver on that in a scalable way is where CRMs can be really supportive. So as an example, and I'll use a very basic one, a lot of financial advisors that I work with will send birthday cards, right? Or birthday emails to their clients. Of course, some of them are still sending this manually because they want it to appear a personal email that's sent out, whereby if you leverage automation in a CRM, you could send 10 emails for all the people that have birthday today, all the clients that have birthdays today as an example, and send it off without having to lift a finger, right? If you're on PTO, you're sick, you're on a golf course getting more clients, you could still engage and keep your clients engaged at that personal level without having to do anything in a systematic way.
Right. And then by doing it that way, you'll be able to see who's opened it.
Correct.
And then determine sort of whether that client is actually engaging with your information.
Correct.
And that can be newsletters, that can be market update emails, those sorts of things. You went back to I'm going to go over one thing. I wrote it down. I call it a client score. Yeah. Right. I think that a lot of advisors will do like client segmentation, but they don't really do a score, right? So, and what I mean by the score, so you can have, bronze, silver, gold, platinum, right? As the
like
the
a
levels.
rating system.
Right.
Yeah.
But really a client score is, something that you can, over time, takes time to measure, but you have to have, there are certain KPIs that you want to measure. So one could be revenue, one could be assets, one could be number of phone calls, which could be positive or negative, right? You have a client that has a
Too
lot of
many
phone calls, that could be a negative thing, right? We may have some of those sometimes.
Yes.
So it's like a negative on the score, right? But what you ultimately end up doing, once you figure out those things, and we can obviously help with that, it actually gives you better insight into how good those clients really are, and then which ones do you want to try to replicate, right? Right. Like, okay, so if you have a client that scores, an 89 out of 100, and maybe they're an 89 because they maybe don't have all a ton of assets with you, but maybe they give you referrals.
Right.
Maybe they have been with you for a long time, so there's they get a numeric number for there.
Right.
Maybe that they only engage you quarterly or whatever it is. There's all sorts of things you can do.
Right.
But that gives you some insight into who are really your best clients.
Best clients. And what's really interesting is like you could create a rubrics in your mind and associate a score, like a number to that. Systematically, each time a client fits that variable in a rubrics, you could add that into their score, and hence you'll be able to define your ideal candidate, right?
Right.
When we talk about identification, it helps you benchmark some of those variables.
Right. Yeah, I think that ultimately what you'll find with data is it takes time to, when you start collecting it, it takes time for, it's like doing a puzzle, right?
It is.
You start putting
really
the pieces together, and then eventually at some point you can start to see the picture, right?
Yeah. That's when it becomes easier.
Data is the same thing. You might have data on your system, but it doesn't say anything at the beginning.
Yeah.
But when you start putting it together and starting seeing a flow, like for instance we were talking before the show started, it would be interesting to understand if there's a correlation within an advisor's practice with how many, I'll just call them engagements, with how many touches a client gets, proactive touches a client gets. Does it correlate to more revenue or less revenue, more AUM, more less AUM, more referrals, right? And so if you started to track that data, where if you see that every one of our clients that has a score of 75 and above, these are this is the number of referrals they get. This is whatever the scores are. But ultimately, what we found is that those clients that are 75 or above have had engagement with us of at least X number of touches.
Right.
And so then you you take that data. Sorry, I stepped backwards. And then you go to the clients that are maybe a 50 to 75, and you'll notice that they don't have the same number of touches. Okay, so then how do you increase the touches to those clients?
Right.
Right.
Identification. Yeah.
Right, but you have to have the data to even know what to do.
Exactly. We had a couple of podcasts, and we were talking about how data could really help you identify and track bottlenecks, like even in a process.
Right.
And like once you know what the bottlenecks are, where improvement is needed, that's when you're like, all right, that's the spot. I need to support it to lift it up a little bit. Or it's not worth my time and we should.
Right.
Yeah.
What kind of bottlenecks when you say?
So when we were talking about processes, you could say when we track closing rates, right?
Right.
Maybe between opportunity stages, if you're seeing that someone's sitting at due diligence for like 90 days, we're like, okay, is it the average? No, it's not the average. Maybe it's the person. Maybe they need to be trained, educated a little bit better. So we identify if the bottleneck is in the process, which is the stage itself, or the person,
right?
Which is, do they need more training or education to be lifted up? Or are we doing something entirely wrong with the entire spectrum, and maybe we don't need due diligence, let's just go to the next step.
Right.
So I think that identification is really the core of yeah.
So that I've been having some conversations with large OSJs and PE firms. I'll just call them PE aggregators, not necessarily the PE firms, but these aggregators. And one of the things that we're trying to work on, which sort of reminded me of this, is that the single source of truth, the whole comment,
Yes.
right, is that for them, what they're trying to figure out, when they buy these practices, they have these they have the sort of, I'll call them child offices or partner offices that all roll up into one large firm.
Yeah.
And what they're finding is that they don't really know what's happening
In the children firms.
we're not saying child like they're children, but
Yeah.
like with Salesforce, it's
Right.
a parent account and the
Yeah.
child account. That's
Yeah.
how that works, right? So we'll call it the sort of the home, the main entity, and then the underlying practices. And what they're finding is that they don't really have good data on the businesses that they rolled underneath them or have partially own. They're buying 20% of a practice.
Yeah.
And they don't understand the data. And so what we're trying to do, the conversations we're having, is being able to create a system where these things we're talking about, stage duration, right? Like how much time is a prospect, even though we're talking about clients, but how much time is a prospect when one of your underlying partner offices engages with a client or prospect, how long do they stay in certain stages?
Right.
What are their closing ratios?
Right.
When, because part of their model
Right.
is they feed these offices new leads, new opportunities, new clients, new investor clients. So wouldn't it be helpful to know that if when you give a new investor client to this office,
Right.
their closing rate is 30 days
That
versus
much better.
45 days?
Yeah.
Right.
What are they doing wrong?
And-
or where's
Right. So not only do you identify they're better at it, so let's give them more, but
Yeah.
you go to the firm that is worse,
Yeah.
and then you say, what are you doing differently that the other
Right.
firm isn't doing?
Right.
Right. Is it okay? So you're implementing the same sales process, so maybe it's the person. Right.
Yeah.
You can also at the same time, not that you can actually start creating a lead score for the
The
actual
prospect itself.
prospect,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because maybe that lead wasn't as good a lead,
Yeah.
but over time, it levels out. And so if you start tracking that stuff over a course of a year, for instance, and you have one office that has a 70% closing rate and one office has a 40% closing rate,
That's a huge disparity.
that's a huge disparity,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, you can say, well, maybe that the lower closing rate office isn't getting as good quality leads,
Right.
but I wouldn't put as much weight into that the longer you go out, because
Right.
the averages will, sort of like the averages will take over, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to allow these groups, these acquirers, to understand their underlying offices.
A little bit better.
Part of the reason is because some of these firms are having conversations with private bankers and whatever their end game is, and this is what the bankers are telling them that they need to do. Like you need to have data flowing up to a single source of truth on all of your underlying offices, and the more data that you have, this is not us saying it, this is what they're being told by investment bankers.
Yeah.
The more data you have on your underlying practices, the better. And now we're not just talking about P&Ls and stuff
Yeah.
like that. We're
Yeah.
talking about data on the clients, right? How many products, I've said this before. So Smith, back in the day, Smith Barney had something called a Folks Report. And one of the
I
data,
remember,
one of the data points was how many products or services does each segment of your clients have, and the more products and services that they had, the higher the assets and the higher the revenue.
Right.
Right. This is the same thing.
That was the
That's sort of
correlation.
lead scoring. It's like old school lead scoring.
Yeah.
Right.
It's predictive analysis to a point. Yeah.
Right. And so this is where data comes in, and where you really have to think about. Do you understand the underlying touch points that are going into servicing your clients?
Yeah.
How many times do you as a practitioner talk to each one of your clients?
Right.
How many times does your staff talk to these clients? How many market updates do they get? Do you do quarterly meetings? Again, and understanding that every one of those things is a touch point, And if you track all that stuff and you can do it in an automated way, because you can, every time there's a touch point, your assistant goes into their system and can check off the
Extract
contact
automatically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so activities actually, I was just thinking about when you were talking about activities like phone calls, in-person visits and all that. If you're tracking it, it actually could give you a better understanding of your margins per client, right? So if you have
that's a whole nother topic, yeah.
Right? If you're charging them a certain fee, is that really, within your margin, or is it like pulling you down? Should you be charging them more?
Right.
And what is this level of service thereafter?
Right. That's where lead scoring comes in. If you have a client that is, like we have, continually calling, you can get to a point where you have a sort of an optimal number of contacts per client based on revenue. I'll say based on a client score. And I'm not going to say revenue, because again, like before, you can have a client that has less revenue, but they're a really good client because they give you a lot of referrals.
Yep.
Right. So maybe you do a sort of a 2-to-1 bonus point, so they get like double points for referrals versus just assets. Right.
Yeah.
But you can basically figure out, based on those lead score, how much time do you put into each client.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could.
Because you might not realize it. One of the things.
I think that's exactly right.
So I'm going to talk about racing for a second, if you don't mind.
I love that.
I'm gonna light up a little bit. So, one of the things that I really love about the sport, and I just came back from Indianapolis, and you're driving and it feels great, and you think you're putting some really great lap times.
Yeah.
I think I could have gone to power faster here, or broken later here, whatever it is. You're in your mind.
Right.
You think you have this concept of
good or bad.
Yeah. And then what you do with racing is you basically get out of the car, you take your chip, and you go right to the telemetry.
Yeah.
And you go look at the data, and you're like, oh,
whoa.
Okay.
I stand corrected.
Right? There was no traffic. I was just slow as shit. And so, I think that this is where having, making decisions based on actual data is really, really important, because it doesn't lie. Like, data doesn't lie.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to see the data in real time. So like when we're racing and you're talking about, finding tenths of seconds, right? Could make it's like one small little change, going to gas, going to power, as we call it, just a fraction of a second sooner, you can pick up 0.2 of a second. Right?
Yeah.
And so with client relationships, you start to realize, wow, our clients that score 75 or higher, on average, we touch them, I'm just making up a number here, 24 times a year. Mm-hmm. But our 50%, our clients with a score of 50, we were only touching them 8 times. Right. So
better margins.
Well, better margins, but you won't know. So you'll track the margins. Yeah. Right. But you should also track is there a correlation? Mm-hmm. And I don't know the answer, which is why I love data. Right. Is there a correlation between the number of times there's always the outlier, the client that's overly obsessed with, speaking about every little thing. But is there a correlation between the number of times you speak with a client about a particular topic and new business that comes in, right? Is there a correlation between the number of in-person meetings and new business? Like, you don't know the answer. The point is, you don't know the answer unless you start tracking it.
Yep.
And maybe there is, and maybe there isn't.
Right.
You will know, which is where the racing thing comes. So, sort of your gut might tell you that there is, right? But wouldn't it be great if you actually knew what the number was? Like,
you either reinforce a thought or you discard it. But the best way to do it is by collecting data on it.
Yeah. Track everything. I had made this comment once before, that I had happened to get to speak with the number 3 guy at Amazon. This was last year, early last year, and we were talking about, well, when is too much data too much, right? And I use paralysis by analysis, and his answer to me was, if you are tracking data and it's not giving you the answers that you're looking for, you don't have enough data.
You need more. Wow.
Yeah.
I need more data.
If he had a microphone, he would have dropped it, right? But he didn't have a microphone. He had a lavalier, so he couldn't drop the lavalier on the phone. And so really what we're talking about here is how do you, when you bring clients in, you should be obsessed about enhancing your client experience.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to understand
what matters to them.
What matters.
Yeah. What matters to them.
Right.
Yeah.
What matters to them. You may find that certain types of clients want higher touch versus other clients, right? And you can get into prospecting. And again, we're not talking about that today. We're just talking about client relationships. But I love how you put activity thresholds, or you might realize that going back to your emails, like you're sending clients different types of emails, but some clients are just not opening up your emails. So that could be a red flag.
Huge red flag.
That you have a client that's not engaged with you.
Right.
And so you might want to call them, and you might want to find out, is everything okay? Hey, yes, noticed you haven't been reading our emails. Is everything okay?
Right.
You might be surprised with that to say, right?
Right.
Or maybe they'd say, I'm not really into emails. I prefer phone calls. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So now you
know how to reach them.
Now you know how to reach them.
Yep.
And give them the client experience that they're looking for, not what you want to give.
I had a client, Frank, once that they really wanted to take this personalized emails to the next level. And what they did was they created like a field. And so every time the assistant would track conversations, she would take notes when the advisors were having, and she would input on just one single field in Salesforce. They had Salesforce, what the last conversation about their personal life was. Oh, I'm having a baby. I'm going on vacation. I'm whatever, right? So they had a custom field on their contact page, just filling one update that they had, that was personal to that client. That became a merge field on the email blast. So it would read hi, Frank, how are you? Last we spoke, you were going on a vacation. How was it?
Oh, got it.
Right?
Okay, yeah,
and so you do that personalization at scale.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Right?
Right, yeah, you can, because based on how you put it in the field,
correct,
determines how because you're basically mail merging that field.
That's it.
Right.
And then you could have the entire other thing is template. You could even say hey, by the way, so some of these performance reporting tools, right? You could be merge them into your CRM, have their rate personalized at scale, which is hey, by the way, we were looking at your performance reports. They are either up or down. Just we're monitoring it. Don't worry. As long as you have those data feeds coming in, or you have a way to track those personalization that something is important to a client, you could personalize at scale.
Right. Got it. Do you find that, can you do this across different CRM systems? So you're talking about Salesforce. Again, we're not going to get into which system is better than the other, but I do find, as we're talking to a lot of firms, that a lot of advisors use Redtail as an example because it's inexpensive.
It's inexpensive.
But do you find that you can still do a lot of this stuff within Redtail?
Not a lot of this. So we have a couple of clients that are on Redtail, and unfortunately there are limitations on what you could merge into, an email blast, how much email blast you could do, how much automation you could do.
Okay.
And this is not to say that, Salesforce is better or Redtail is worse. There's just limitation based on the cost.
Got it. So when you first start talking, so let's focus on this whole client relationship thing, right? So when you first take on a client, I guess, how are you trying to identify these types of things and what their client engagement looks like today? I mean, you find that a lot of them are interested in this, or they're just like, hey, I don't know what I don't know? Like, what does your initial engagement look like with a client?
I think oftentimes you're looking for us to come in and help them kind of figure out the platform, because a lot of advisors, like whether they are on Redtail, WealthBox, Salesforce, they don't know the full capacity of the platform. So they're looking for to us to tell them what are the capabilities and how we can curate it to their own business. And that's our strength, right? Like JEDI comes in and we're like, all right, what does your day-to-day look like? And how much of that can be systematized within the platform that you currently have.
Got it. So you sort of walk through a day in the life of both the advisor and I would imagine their assistants.
Correct. Mostly their assistant, yeah.
Right.
Right, because advisors are usually out and about, getting more leads, prospects, golf courses.
Right. Okay, got it. When you start to build out, like a lead scoring system, what is the expectation in terms of when they will start to see data that they can actually then make decisions off of? And I know that's sort of a generic question, but if I come to you and say, hey, listen, I love this idea of a lead score. Yeah. Like, how do we start it? And like, when will we have some tangible data? I'll just call it not evidence, but tangible data, so we can help make decisions. Like, what does that process look like?
So I would say start yesterday. Like a thought comes in, and if you're able to execute on it. The amount of data, like a lot of people will create bells and whistles, and unfortunately it sits stale. But if you're consistent about inputting information, whether it's like, hey, they're engaging, I had a call, I had a meeting, I met them at a restaurant, whatever that looks like, and we can, once that data is captured or automated through integration, once that data is captured, I would say at least 6 months to a year to create that baseline benchmark, and then you could kind of grow from it.
Right. So you have to really be patient.
You have to be patient.
I think that's where I was going with this.
Yeah.
You have to be patient and consistent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I think that at the beginning you're going to collect data, and then you're going to review the data, and it's not going to say anything to you. You're like, okay, I don't know what to do with this. Right.
Right.
You really need to, we've been collecting data in our company for a long time now, for a couple of years, and so now we can, whether it's closing rates, dials.
We're very good at this.
Yeah, leads, the number of dials to generate a lead, all those types of things.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for a long time now. I say a long time, probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 years now.
Yeah.
Right? So we have a lot of data, so we can compare now data from this year, data from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
We have this many people, we have X amount of people doing this activity. Are they getting better or worse, right? Versus when we had the same number of people 2 years ago and we were getting a different result. Mm-hmm. The same thing can apply here. It just takes time when you bring on your clients and then again prospects as well.
That's really interesting point, because you could go from week over week analysis, the more data you have, to month over month analysis, to year over year analysis.
Right.
And that's when you really start building that concrete foundation.
Right.
On, okay, well, last year we were here. Why are we here this year? And how could we do this better?
Yeah. Right. And so, it's about being, I would say, like the word I use all the time, it's about being obsessed.
Yes.
Right, or curious.
Curious is better.
Curious. Wow, I'm curious why.
Yeah.
I'm curious why these particular clients do more business with us, or I'm curious why we had a better quarter this year than this year versus last time. Mm-hmm. Right. You can go back and look at how many appointments did you have.
Right.
How many email outreaches did you have?
Right.
Go look at the data of the activity and see if there's any correlation. Mm-hmm. And then you can do quarter by quarter. Okay, well, you can see that in December or Q4 of the year, you have a higher level of engagement,
right,
which leads to more money coming in January and February.
Right.
Okay, so why should that be any different in Q2? Just try to replicate the
that.
number of the amount of engagement,
Yep.
right? And then
Yep.
ultimately that should translate into more money. And that's how you use data. That's how you work with data to understand how your business operates. Again, if you want to create more, we talk about valuations, right? That's the other thing we worked on when we're talking to these other firms and OSJs. One of the things they're trying to do is build value in their businesses so they can sell them. And what bankers are telling everybody and what PE firms are saying is the better the data that you have on your business, the more data you have in the business, the more we're willing to pay, right?
Systems and processes.
Right, because
Yeah.
they need to understand what they're buying.
Yeah.
Because once they understand what they're buying and they have the data, they can say, okay, great. So if we can just turn this data point up a little bit,
The growth is
will come.
exponential.
Right,
Yep.
right. So,
Yep.
so if we know that for every 3 meetings, and again, I'm just making up a number here,
Yeah.
for every 3 meetings that you have with a client that scores 75 or higher,
Right.
you're 90 days later, your net new assets goes up by $10 million. I'm just making up a number.
Wow.
By $5 million, right?
Right.
Okay. So how do we increase those numbers, right? And then you go down, and then you automate it by going down to the next level. Right? So how do we increase the 50s, the clients with a score of 50? It looks like you're only touching them on average of 2 times a quarter.
Right.
But if we can double that by going 4 times a quarter,
Does that increase?
does that increase? And over time, you'll know the data. So when you go to a PE firm to sell your practice, you can say,
This is the controlling factor.
these are the control. Exactly.
Yep.
And so when you want to buy my business, because I don't have the staff to increase the number of calls and blah, blah, blah. But
Right.
if we did,
Right.
here's what happens to my business.
That's an amazing example.
Right.
Right.
So that's why, as an advisor, you should be thinking about this stuff. Forget about the fact that you should be working with us because, I think one of the benefits, I'm just going to take a commercial break here for a second, right? One of the things that makes our business so unique is that we see all sides. So we see the transition side, we see the acquisition side through our M&A firm. And so we're getting all of this input
Yeah.
from all the buyers and sellers and why one firm is more worth than another. We're seeing why certain practices are better than other practices. And then we're able to go in and have these conversations, which makes it a much more unique thing. I think there are a lot of, I don't know of any firm like JEDI in the industry that is like ours that's connected and fully integrated
well.
into the wealth management space like this is, right?
No.
There are firms out there that do Salesforce integrations and all
Right.
that other stuff,
Right.
right? But they don't specialize in wealth management.
The multifaceted approach that we have. We're
Right.
we're present everywhere. We're hearing about it from all directions.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so, look, I think that's why we have the insight that we have. So, look, if you're unsure about this stuff and this is intriguing to you, you should definitely reach out to us. We'd love to help you at least have a conversation, right?
Yeah.
Some of it is, you don't know what you don't know. That's just what I like to
Exactly.
tell advisors.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So let's just have a conversation about what you do know,
Yeah.
right? And then we can come back to you with okay, well, here's what our other clients are doing.
Right.
And then what happens, which is what happened to me a couple of years ago when we first started working together, because we had a pretty good system,
Right.
but it wasn't as robust. And once I started to learn, I can get more information, the stuff that I was able to get out of the system.
Right. You're like, whoa.
Wow, what else can we do?
You're right.
Right?
Yeah.
You start to stack ideas and thoughts because now you become educated about the things that you didn't know, and then you get more data, and then more data. Again, more data just helps you make better decisions, right? Which is the whole point of this data-driven decisions.
Right.
Right. It helps you make better decisions
In real time.
in real time,
Yeah.
both to help you make money
Yeah.
and sometimes to help you save money, right?
Yeah.
If you, again, back to the other point, you might have a data point that shows that a certain subset of clients not only don't pay you a lot of money, right? But those particular clients actually have a higher interaction with you and your staff.
that becomes a variable of identification.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you make that as a negative, like, okay, you might have a part of your lead score is 10 touches a year, right? Do you feel like is suitable? And anything above a 10 starts to become a negative on the lead score.
Something, yeah.
Well, it starts to become a negative on the lead score, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So if it's a 20, right, then basically it negates that whole score, right? Because 10 is positive, 20 is negative.
Right.
And so that's where you can save money. Not that we do this with employees too, but you can do this with employees as well to a degree, right? You can track certain things. Yeah. But the point is that use data. Use data to help you make money. Use data to help you save money. Use data to help increase your relationships. I know, and it sounds sort of odd. Like, well, how am I going to increase my client relationships by using data? Isn't that sort of cold?
Yeah.
It's the opposite.
It's the opposite. It's definitely the opposite.
Right.
Yeah.
And we didn't even get into AI. I mean, you can use AI to do a lot of stuff nowadays. Automations and
I mean, you could gauge, we were talking about this the other day, you could gauge a tone of a client by the kind of words they're using in an email, as an example, right? Which is like, if they're using words like, I don't know, blatant, disappointed, or didn't like, or stuff like that, you can categorize them as an NPS score, right? Like bottom, like neutral, not happy. Right. And then at the end of the year or end of the quarter, end of the month, you could reach out to a bunch of those clients, be like, do they need nurturing? Do I need to take them out to dinner, figure out what's happening?
Right.
So it helps you really identify where the outreach is needed.
Yeah, and look, AI in our space is relatively new, so we're still working through that right now, but that's something that you need to get your arms around and get ahead of, because it's where the future is going.
Yep.
And it's just a matter of how you're able to integrate that into whatever it is you're doing, how your firm will allow you to do that. But most importantly, and you said it the best before about when you engage with a client, like, you need to start yesterday.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like just start tracking stuff.
Yeah.
And see where it goes. And, when we first started tracking we did a weekly scorecard, we track all this data. There were things that we used to track that we don't track anymore, because we realized, like, it's not relevant.
It didn't go anywhere. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but you have to just throw everything on, like, just start by throwing everything out there.
Yeah.
Right. And then, again, part of tracking is, what is it? A lot of advisors will hear, like, oh, great, so that's going to take up a lot of my time. No. It does to a degree, but if you can automate a lot of these things, then you can just get reporting. That's one of the things that we do, is we help clients set up whatever those key data points are, and then you can automate getting reports sent to you on that data on a cadence of some. It doesn't matter. It could be monthly, it could be weekly, it could be daily, whatever it is.
Yep.
Or what we do also is we have dashboards that you did a great job with, so we can just go right on to our main system, and it just shows us. It shows us sort of like speedometer type
everything,
things.
like KPIs related to, like, how many dials you made, what opportunities are in what stages, what's active, what's not, what's closed.
Exactly, and it's for me, I can go in quickly and just see stuff at a glance, right? And if I want more information, I click the button and it gives me the report, right? But that's how you are able to use data the right way and really get away from this whole paralysis by analysis.
Oh, yes.
Because I used to think that, like, paralysis by analysis, but what actually it's made me, as an owner, operate faster, make quicker decisions. And because the decisions that I had the data points to make them. It's helped us make money, but it's also saved me money on some things. So
I'm sure. And like with data points, like, you could start with your gut. Like, a lot of entrepreneurs or financial advisors know, like, they have this feeling like, oh, this is going to work. This is because they've been in business for a couple of years, and they have a gut feeling like, oh, these are the variables. Like, just start out with those data points. See if it's just a gut feeling, or, you're systematically able to either prove it or discard it.
Right. Like in our world, what we have found is that dials, when we used to have this debate, right? We had this debate for a long time about, Well, it's not necessarily about dials. It's about conversations.
Right.
Right. And we would go back and forth. And so we
Right.
would track.
What's the duration of the
Right.
conversation?
The duration of the conversation. And we would track all of these things.
Right.
And ultimately what we came down to is, yes, that's true. Conversations are super important. Ultimately, those that leads to getting a client, right?
Right.
But it really came down to dials.
Yeah.
Right.
Numbers.
Numbers. The more dials that we can make, this is sort of inside baseball at our firm here,
Right.
the more dials we're able to make, then the more conversations we were able to have. Right. Which seems, and again,
intuitive.
that was intuitive, right? And that was sort of what my gut was saying. But
Yes.
I had some people on the team that had a counter to that, right? Well, it's not about dials. It's about number of conversations and, blah, 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 right? And so we basically put the conversation to bed.
Right.
Once we had
here you go.
here's the data. I don't know what to tell you. This is like 2 years of data, and the numbers don't lie.
I am right.
Right. I am right. Right. But then it changed, and then it changed our direction. Because not change our direction, but it allowed us to then move in a direction that we were going to go in much faster, because now we had buy-in
Yes.
on what we were trying to do, and then all of the activities and decisions that we made were essentially around that single KPI.
Yeah.
Right. And then it was, okay, well, how many dials does it take to get a lead?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Which helped us in terms of identifying people and versus process.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Because, okay, if this person is making less dials to get a lead, what are they doing differently than the other person?
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so, they're calling the same list. They're using the same script. Right? So when you do a couple of those other things.
Is it like that personal
So
touch?
is it a personal? So what we were able to identify over time is when we see in this particular KPI dials to leads.
Right.
When we see that dials to leads start to really spike up with somebody, we know that it's not a process thing because everybody's following the same process. We know it's a people thing.
It's a people thing.
It's a person
That's
thing.
That's soft skill.
Right.
Yeah.
So we know that they have either checked out, or their energy is low, or they're not paying attention when they're making phone calls. They're not listening to the advisors. They're doing something wrong,
Right.
because their number shouldn't be as high as it is. And so
Yeah.
our goal is to drive that number down. But I will tell you that it took us a while to start to really see the truth in terms of those data points.
Yeah,
and
sure.
so you need, as an advisor, you need to start tracking whatever data you can think of, like yesterday. We'd love to help you. Sue can help you. This is basically all she's done in her career is work with RIAs and business owners, financial advisors.
Yep.
So there isn't much that she hasn't seen yet. If you're an OSJ and you're trying to track all the advisors underneath you and all those data points, we can help you with that as well. We're working with some firms that we do that for. And so, Sue, how do they reach you if they want to talk to you?
At Sue, not at Sue at Sue Cheema at eliteconsultingpartners.com. I forgot my own email today. Sorry.
Well, you didn't forget it was at. It's like at. I do that sometimes when I'm writing a post about something at. I want to do the hashtag. I'm like, is it at or is it just at? Anyway, so say that again.
Sue Cheema at eliteconsultingpartners.com.
Got it. Or you can give me a call at frank at eliteconsultingpartners.com. Don't forget, you can also DM me on my Instagram account, which is franklarosa.elite. You can LinkedIn us. We're both on LinkedIn, so
Yes,
you can DM us
please.
there, have some conversations. And again, if you're at the beginning of this and you're just trying to explore, what you don't know, what you don't know, you want to say, hey, I don't know what I don't know. I'm a financial advisor and I don't know what I don't know. So like an AA meeting, right? I'm a financial advisor and I don't know what I don't know. We're happy to have those conversations and just see if there's an area of opportunity where we can help you and be more efficient with your practice and help you take it to another level. So and ultimately end up increasing the valuation of your business, which I know is everybody's
Ultimate goal. Yeah.
That's the ultimate goal.
Yeah.
So, anyway, thanks for joining and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Advisor Talk with Frank LaRosa. If you're looking for more advice or solutions on any topics in the financial services industry, or you just want to subscribe to our podcast, head on over to eliteconsultingpartners.com podcast.